Hello, everyone. We got him back. I usually start with a bunch of nicknames for him, like the podcast king and all that. But we'll keep it simple. To quote the late, great Tina Turner, he's simply the best. Welcome, Calvin.
Yeah, that's a new one. I'm always excited to see what creative intro you're gonna come up with when I hop on the pod. So appreciate it.
So I said after the WNBA season, with being the podcast king, too busy. You were on all the shows. Everyone wants this time. We couldn't get it before the full NCAA season started. But we are within a week, maybe a little bit less than a week before technically the Big Ten women's basketball season starts. So what better time? We have some games. I think if we look at the standings, a very familiar team to one of us is at the standings at 9-0. We haven't played any games yet, but one team's at 9-0. I'm going to take it right now. So
Yeah, I wonder who that is.
I'm sure we'll talk about them, I'm assuming. But let's start it out with this. We have a month in of the season, maybe a little less. What are your thoughts so far on the Big Ten teams, kind of what's going on in the Big Ten Conference?
Yeah, I think some of the kind of chatter around the women's basketball space at towards the end of last year, even not even over the offseason, like as the end of last year was approaching, that I heard at least was like, oh, the Big Ten is going to take a big step back. It's not going to be as good. Like, obviously you lose Caitlin Clark, but you also lose like players like Mackenzie Holmes, J.C. Sheldon, Jazz Shelley. Like, there's a lot of talent that's departing this league, and it's not going to be as competitive at the top. And obviously, like, you bring in the LA schools, who are two of the best in the country. But even outside of that, I think that the demise has been greatly exaggerated, if you want to say. I think there's still a lot of competitive basketball at the top of this league, even if you look at 3 through however far you want to go. Iowa still looks like a second weekend team. They're not going to be in their third straight national championship without Caitlin Clark. I'm not naive, but they played really well, and even without Lucy Olson, last couple of games they played pretty well. Oregon, again, this is not the Sabrina Satu Ruthie level type of Oregon, but they've rebounded to some extent compared to where they were the last year or two. Of course, their first year in the league as well. Ohio State, Jelani Cambridge looks great for them, and they've continued to roll. I think Michigan State and Illinois have continued to look really impressive in the first few years of their coaching staffs there. And like with Nebraska, Alexis Markowski and Britt Prince, I think, have Nebraska competitive again. I think you can go down the list, and there's a lot of teams that can compete with anyone in this league. And just because Caitlin Clark isn't playing in this league anymore doesn't mean that there's not a really high-level basketball going on.
Fair. I love it. Hey, you even have Northwestern upsetting Utah, who then beat Notre Dame. So top to bottom,
Yeah,
we're
yeah,
it's pretty
and hey,
competitive.
you know who beat Northwestern, by the way?
Oh, Illinois State.
Illinois State. I think Illinois State is better than Notre Dame. Not to get off topic with the Big Ten, but that's my takeaway from that whole
Oh,
deal.
agreed. 100%. Because remember, as a person who Washington had lost to Montana, and then Washington was 2 seconds away from beating LSU, the Gophers would have been better than LSU.
Yeah, that's how basketball works, I think.
Correct. I will take that. I will take that win there. So we'll start at the top. Since the commissioner of the Big Ten didn't wear a dress to let us know which team could win, I would like you to start with who are your favorites to walk away with the Big Ten title?
Yeah, well, it's got to be the LA schools, and I would have, if I was going to pick between them, picked USC coming into the year. We would have had this pod at the beginning of college season. As you mentioned, we're having it now instead, and if I'm picking between them at this point, I'm picking UCLA based on, USC's got some new pieces they're playing great, don't get me wrong, but I think the Notre Dame game kind of exposed, especially how Notre Dame looked since then. Not as impressive as we thought they were in that game. It maybe exposed that it's kind of tough to gel right away when you bring in a bunch of new pieces like USC did, and then of course the injury to Kennedy Smith didn't help. Whereas UCLA, what they did to South Carolina and what Lauren Betts has been doing this year, and they're not even full yet either. They're still waiting on Charlize Ledger-Walker, and of course Kiki Rice missed a couple games at the beginning as well. They look like maybe the best team in the country, not just the Big Ten. I know that's where the AP poll has them right now, and you can maybe make an argument. There's a lot of good teams at the top of the country, but I think UCLA has the edge for me, but I definitely think that USC is going to put those pieces together and figure it out. And that Notre Dame game could be one of those you look back on as a big surprise, and like in the type of game where if they meet up again, you expect a totally different result.
Right.
And that may happen deep in the tournament. So I wouldn't write them off either, but I definitely think that the battle for the Big Ten crown is really coming down to LA this year, which is still so weird to say. It doesn't make any sense
We're
with the
coast to
realignment, but
coast.
I think it goes through LA.
Fair. I agree with you on that. I think how I would describe it is UCLA is more, they have the more depth and kind of spread out talent, and you don't always know who they're coming at you with. You don't always know which night who's going to be. Betts is always going to kind of get hers. Kiki Rice when she gets kind of fully back to it. But you can have Janiah Barker come off the bench. You have multiple different ways that they can attack a team where USC, you really know which two are coming at you. They have a lot of the good freshmen and stuff, don't get me wrong, but you really know which two are going to take the most majority of the shots. It's going to be coming to them. It's kind of the monster you see coming, where with UCLA, it could be, okay, we've reined in bets. Now the guards are raining threes on us. And you have someone different, and that kind of depth is going to make them, I think, be a little bit past USC, where USC has maybe the two best players between the two schools, but I think the better team is UCLA.
Yeah, I would agree with that, and I think everything that you just said points to I think the importance of Talia von Oelhoffen for USC, because I think obviously a lot of teams are loading up and trying to take away Juju and Kiki, and Talia von Oelhoffen throughout her career before she got to USC even has had some really big moments at times, and then obviously some times where it feels like she's not as much of a factor. So if you get games where she is clicking and where she can step up if defenses are keying in on those other two, then I think USC is as tough to beat as basically anyone. And especially once some of those freshmen that you mentioned really kind of get acclimated to the college level and get their feet wet, because I think that's the key for them. They did bring in a really, really good recruiting class, but it's hard to beat. Not everyone can step in week one of college basketball. I know there are some freshmen across the country who have been doing that, but it's really hard to do that and make that type of impact.
Well, that was a good segue there. We'll go from there. You mentioned freshmen. Who are some of the, like, I'm not going to say biggest, but like most impactful freshmen you've seen kind of throughout the Big Ten? Like, we know that Jelani Cambridge's, Michigan has a trio. Kind of where are you like looking when you see freshmen that are really making the most impact for their teams?
Yeah, well, we talked about USC's freshmen, who I think are only going to continue to make more of an impact. And you mentioned, Jelani Cambridge. She's right at the top of the list for me. I got a few that are right at the top of the list, and she's right there with the way that she exploded onto the scene in her first game. And then someone else who exploded on the scene is, you talked about Michigan's freshman, but specifically Silas Swords, and what she did in game one was incredible. And then I think Britt Prince, who I mentioned earlier, has really kept Nebraska humming after losing Jess Shelley. And now I know you were going to talk a little bit into the pod about injuries, and Natalie Potts is down, but I think the play of Britt Prince has been huge for Nebraska early on. So a lot of big-time impact freshmen in this league.
I want to give a shout out to the reigning Miss Minnesota basketball, Olivia Olson, going crazy with over 16 points per game for Michigan. She just seamlessly transitioned. And then, I'm going to do it. I have to. I think a huge underrated freshman in this conference is Tori McKinney at Minnesota. She started, as we said, we'll talk about injuries. Since Mara Braun went down, she's been the two-time starter. She's our second best percentage three-point shooter. I say she's already our best, like, one-on-one lockdown on-ball defender that we have. 6'1", is just long, lanky, athletic. When you watch her, how I describe it is she's doing what those freshmen do. Her mistakes, her good, her bad, are all done at 100 miles an hour. You never have to ramp her up, ever have to ramp her up. And her ability to get steals, it's just such an underrated thing that she just fits perfectly for this team, and she's able to get that lockdown defense. The example I use is she locked in the first quarter of the very first game. That first quarter alone, she didn't get credit for steals. She caused 3 turnovers just with her size. Just with her length and her speed, they were trying to get past it and got steals. And I'm not ready to say she's going to be on it yet, because I think they go with 5. I say by the end of the season, Tori McKinney will be a strong candidate for all Big Ten freshman team because of her impact that she's going to have, especially now as a starter, playing the Mara minutes and kind of living up to that defender with what Coach Johnny P wants. I think Tori McKinney's a name to remember in terms of freshmen. She's not going to be at the top of the top, but I think she could be a strong candidate for all Big Ten freshman team.
The impressive thing, and when you talk about her defense, is that usually that's the end of the floor that takes a little bit longer for freshmen having to step up and guard players better than they were ever guarding in high school. And sometimes that offensive talent, you can go up a level and you can still make shots, you can still handle the ball, but when it comes to defense, especially certain systems and just like it's a lot different than playing AAU, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so to step in as a freshman, I think, and have it on that end right away is even more impressive than to step in and maybe drop 30 right away. That's not impressive as well, but
Fair.
That really stands out.
So let's talk about some surprises. Negatively, positively, either way you want to go. Who are some teams that have kind of caught you maybe off guard or surprised you a little bit?
Yeah, I have to be honest, there's not a ton in this league that has really shocked me to this point. I was definitely, maybe some individual results have shocked me. I was surprised that USC lost the way they did to Notre Dame, for example. But in terms of a team on the whole, I will say that I did not expect Oregon to be back where they are now.
Mm-hmm.
The way that they've been trending the last few years, really ever since that Big Three departed, it was not looking good for that program. But when they beat Baylor, I think that was the first time for me this year that I thought,
Mm-hmm.
Watching that game, they might have something again. They're not going to be a Final Four team again, but they might be nationally relevant again. And so they did drop a couple last week. Georgia Tech, South Dakota State, not terrible losses. South Dakota State's a good mid-major team, but they also haven't played a true road game yet. Is the biggest thing.
Fair.
They've been at home and on neutral sites, and they don't play a true road game until the Big Ten season. They're not playing in anyone else's building in the non-conference. So
Fair.
In terms of whether this continues and whether they really are for real, I think we're going to find out once they got to go on the road, because you learn a lot about teams when they have to go on the road, and especially in a conference like the Big Ten. So we'll see, but that's been an early surprise for me.
I agree with you. I think there's three results. I would say Utah losing to Northwestern. That one caught me way off guard. Oregon beating Baylor. I brought up Montana able to get Washington shocked me a little bit. I don't know how good. I haven't seen a lot of Washington, but I know that they had LSU more than on the ropes. I feel like those are the three results that I look at in the conference. I'm like, those kind of surprised me. Like you said, maybe USC, the way Notre Dame took them apart was a little bit surprising. The only team that I would say personally they've done better than, and I probably underestimated them, was Michigan. You kind of lost Layla Fila. Oh my goodness. You know where I'm going with this. I'm losing my thoughts here. But you don't always know if freshmen are going to always hit. You don't always know if they're going to right away and hit the ground running. And they're starting three of them. They've just not missed a beat, and they actually look better offensively this year than they have for the last couple of years. It was a lot of when they had Naz Hillman pound it down there kind of thing. So I said Michigan's been, I didn't expect them to be terrible, but they've been far more in a way better than I thought they were going to be this early.
Yeah, definitely. Their freshmen have been clicking right away, which is really cool. And on Washington, I'm drawing a blank now who they played. I think it was the game before that Montana game, but someone, it was Cal something or Cal State,
Cal
one
Poly.
of those schools. Was it Cal Poly, I think? Yeah. Had them basically down to the buzzer. And Washington escaped that one. And then they went and same thing happened the other way to LSU. So it's a tough team to figure out.
So then we've talked about it. We can talk here a little bit with one of the things. Unfortunately, we said some big names have left the Big Ten. Unfortunately, some big names have been injured in the Big Ten this year. We talk about a Natalie Potts with a torn ACL. Mara Braun, unfortunately, had the exact same foot injury occur. I don't know if we have anything official on Cody McMahon or Sydney Parrish. They've been out for the last probably 4 or 5. I know Sydney Parrish was at a tournament. She has not been back since. We have not gotten official word. Cody McMahon, I don't know what's going on there. She's played 3 or 4 games, I think, and has not been back since. And we've heard to my knowledge, we have not heard anything. Kind of, we'll start with opening thoughts and kind of the unfortunate injuries for these teams. And then, which of these teams do you think are right now, from what you've seen, most prepared to handle the loss? Because those are 4 big names and all pretty big contributors for those 4 teams.
Yeah, well, injuries suck. I hate it so much. It's the worst part of sports by far. And it already, obviously, you're seeing way too many of them. I think in terms of which teams are best equipped to handle it, Nebraska, Alexis Markowski is playing the best basketball, especially offensively, of her career, and I think that has really helped kind of mitigate that loss of Natalie Potts. And then Ohio State, I think their system, number one, just kind of helps them, sort of prevents them from relying too heavily on any one player for success, and I think that's a big part of it. And I also think I haven't seen a ton of details either, like you, but I keep seeing these tweets that Cody is day-to-day, but she's been day-to-day for
A month.
a lot of days, so I don't know how many days is day-to-day. But it doesn't seem like it's going to be something that's going to keep her out like months, like
Right.
a Natalie Potts ACL for the season type of deal. So it's also just the type of thing where you do expect her back at some point, and it's going to be a little bit easier to sustain however
Right.
long they got to ride without her.
I will just say this, as the team that I know of the most, it's not a great thing to have to say this again, but it's kind of, we're back here again. And so how I've described it is last year's experience and this year's depth, I think, are what are going to buoy the Gophers. Especially that, because it happened in shoot around of a game. So that could have really thrown you off for that game. It really, how I described it is the other starters, Amaya Battle, Mallory Heyer, Grace Grahalski, and Sophie Hart, all kind of had a look about them of, we just go back to what we did last year. Like, we know what we can do. It kind of was like, here we go again. Like, we shift back to that mode. And it was, you said you never want it to be like back-to-back years kind of thing, but that's why I don't think it's, and it also helps that they have a weaker non-con. Last year it happened in January 28th. This year it happened, in middle of November. You kind of have some lesser non-con games that you can kind of work through your rotations again. You're not in the heart of the Big Ten season, and you have depth. You have you have 2 transfers from within the Big Ten of Annika Stewart and Taylor Woodson, who are coming off the bench, who could very well be starters. They both have played excellent. Tori McKinney's been a godsend from the freshman who has started in place. And you have those experienced 4 starters who are like, it sucked at times last year, let's be honest. They went 1-8 after she went down. But they learned, and then you had like those moments in the WNIT where they learned how to win. You had to go to Wyoming, and Troy went on the road without her. And I think those are the moments where your depth is going to be able to buoy you. I'm really curious for this Sunday of Gophers versus Nebraska, because both are coming in without their leading scorers. Because Natalie Potts, at least when she went down, was the leading scorer for Nebraska. And I will say, I view it similar to, now granted, this is more of a comparison, not a direct correlation. I kind of view it like USC and UCLA. Nebraska has the Britt Prince and Alexis Markowski, who can go off for 20 plus and really own those 2 games. And those 2 can really get rolling. But I think Gophers have maybe a 7 that could each give you anywhere between 8 to 15. So it's kind of like, if your depth could maybe buoy us, like Annika can maybe pull Alexis away from the paint to where now you have Mal or open for Mal, or for Amaya driving, Tori driving. And I said, and it's the biggest jump up for, I think, for sure, the Gophers to see, and you're on the road. That's why I'm curious to see, like, which of those 2 teams, like, once we get into the conference, all 4 of these teams that we mentioned, you're going to figure out, like, your weaknesses are going to be exposed. You're going to be ramping up and stuff. Does that depth hold on? Does that experience hold on for all 4 of them?
Yeah, absolutely. And what you said about, like, going 1-8 last year without Mara, and just the injuries kind of have a way of forcing everyone to grow up a little bit and learn how to play a different role. And I think you can even look at some really high level examples of Hannah Hidalgo coming in without Olivia Miles, and I think Hannah Hidalgo's a lot better off for that, even though everyone would have loved Olivia Miles to be healthy last year, and Madison Booker at Texas, I think, got a lot of experience running the point that she wouldn't have gotten if Rory Harmon had been healthy all year. And I think sometimes those things, especially the fact that Mara Braun has gotten hurt multiple times now, it sucks. But you can look at in the long run and kind of see growth in some of the other players and the rest of the roster in situations like that.
So it's at a golden opportunity. Nebraska stayed in the top 25. You're on the road, but Potts, and to be honest, Potts is maybe the one that they would have struggled with the most to match up with because of her length, her her ability to inside out. But I said, you're not. It isn't all of a sudden like the Titanic is sinking again this year like it was last year. Like I feel like, and even if you go into Nebraska on Sunday and lose, you then have two more you have time before it's like we're in the heart of the non-conference season. And just looking at that conference season, you start with at Nebraska, it's at Penn State at home, at Wisconsin, home against Illinois, home against Rutgers. Now, there's good teams in there. I'm not saying you're going 5-0. You probably have to hit the ground running in those five, because at the end of January, you then have a five-game run of at UCLA, at USC, home against Iowa, home against Indiana, at Ohio State. With or without Mara, that's a tough 5-game schedule.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the schedule gets a lot tougher after you turn that corner. So it is. There's nothing ever easy in the Big Ten, but I think if you had to draw it up, you'd rather play the Rutgers of the world and some of those teams you mentioned versus start out with like the LA trip and maybe Ohio State and whoever else.
So we will see. I said Natalie Potts, we know, is not back this year. I said I have no inside information if Mara's back or not this year. I think it's kind of be a play-by-play. She is about 1 week post-surgery, so we did do surgery. Like I was there. Anywho, so let's go to positive stuff. Let's go to exciting stuff. Who are teams that Calvin has that come March, even if they're not firing on all cylinders right now, if come March, you like these teams could make a deep run come March?
Yeah, it depends what you mean by deep. I think if we're talking Final Four, national championship deep, I do think it's the LA schools. I would be fairly surprised if you got anyone. I think maybe Ohio State. You could maybe throw Ohio State into the mix, but even then, I think it would be a little bit of an overachievement if they make the Final Four. If you're talking deep, like Sweet 16, like second weekend type of run, I think all of a sudden you open up to like half the conference. Like lots and lots and lots of teams are capable of going into the tournament and winning 1, 2, maybe 3 games. I don't think there are a whole lot outside of LA that are capable of going and cutting down the nets at the end, but I think there are a ton that are capable of making a semi-deep run. And you could really you could go down to basically everyone who was last year plus the LA schools in Oregon on that list, in my opinion.
I think a team that we haven't talked much about yet that I thought maybe it's going to take them a little bit longer to like gel, but because usually when you just build through a massive transfer portal, you don't have that cohesion, you don't have that connectedness right away. Maryland looks good. Like Maryland's had some like bumps here and there and stuff, but Smichael, she knows the Big Ten. She's kind of, really kind of rejuvenated her career at Maryland. They look good and they look deep. Like they look like they could go 7, 8, maybe 9 deep. I don't know if Sellers is probably the one that like keeps things rolling at the lead guard position. She's probably your most explosive one or most talented player maybe, but I don't know. I don't know if you also have someone that could like explode for 40. Maybe Smichael could do that. But Maryland looks like they're deep, they're fast, they're connected. Maryland looks like someone I'm like, I don't want to see come February, come March, come Big Ten tournament. No, thank you.
Yeah, well, I think the transfer portal has been continuing to be a bigger part of college basketball in general, and I think Brenda Frese has kind of been building teams through the transfer portal maybe a little bit longer than some other coaches, and so she's kind of used to it, and this program has done this before, and so I think when you see Maryland kind of enter a new year with a lot of new faces like a Kayleen Smichael and you think it's going to take them a while to gel, and what are they going to look like? And they lost this, that, and the other player. And Maryland is one of those teams that I think it doesn't really matter. Like whatever the roster looks like, it's going to look different every year
Right.
because that's how they build it. But they're always gonna be right there. Whoever they bring in, like they're going to be a team that can compete.
I said I'm excited with some of these matchups that we get because once again with the added addition you only get one team twice and stuff, like the fact that you would get USC, UCLA twice, that's a pretty big duo, and they both are like I think late in the season, like maybe February-ish for both. So I'm like, you give them time to kind of heal as much as you're going to heal with them type situation. So
Yeah, yeah.
we mentioned her name, Caitlin Clark, the long gone Iowa great. We know Juju, we know Kiki. Who right now is 5 players, maybe if we're looking at an all first team, that Calvin's like right now is like the names to know in the Big Ten?
Yeah, it's definitely Juju. Starts with Juju, obviously.
Fair.
Whether you're talking about the country or the conference. Lauren Betts, I think, is right up there. Kiki has looked pretty. I won't say up and down, but maybe the transition hasn't been like quite as smooth for her. But I do still think she's right up there in that conversation when you're talking about 5 players, all Big Ten first team, and you can open it up a lot after that. Lucy Olson on the list, players like Alexis Markowski. You can maybe even throw some other freshmen in there, like a Sila Swords. Honestly, I don't know if Sila will work her way up to the top 5. And this conference is crazy. There's so many players who could, but it gets really, really tough after that, I think, to be honest.
So, do you want to make a suggestion of the 3 teams that won't make the Big Ten tournament? Nah, we won't do that to you. I like to get them in trouble, but we won't get them in that much trouble. I will say this. I ask you this every year. I think some of the same people are still there. Any coaches you feel right now in the Big Ten that come April could maybe be on the hot seat or maybe off in the sunset and we have a new coach on the horizon?
Yeah, I probably said this last year that it's only a matter of time before Joe at Northwestern hangs it up. I have no idea what he's thinking. It's not. I don't know him personally, but it's. I mean, hot seat doesn't even feel like the right word because he's like he's gonna retire. That's what it's gonna be. But
kind of there till he wants it.
Right, exactly. But you just wonder how long that's going to be. So that's the first one that comes to mind. I mean, you are trying to get me in trouble naming names that
I try.
get fired. I don't know. There's a lot of good coaches in this league, but I'm interested who you got, to be honest. Let's flip this on you. Let's put you on the spot.
Wisconsin. They have not made the NCAA tournament for 15 years. They have not been above 500 since 17, maybe 17, 18. I get that you have Sarah Williams, who's I think outstanding, and probably if you put her, I would put her up there similar to the level of like a Kiki. Like she's someone that wouldn't, I guess, be completely overwhelmed by Kiki or Lauren Betts. I will say that. Like I think she can hold her own there. I've said that. I think I've said this before. Illinois showed that you can raise a dormant program like that with the right coaching. So I think when people use like the portal or like where they're located and all that stuff, I'm like. I think it put more pressure on Wisconsin when you look at like as easy as Shauna Green. She did it like that, and I almost think Illinois was further kind of dormant than even Wisconsin was, and she did it instantly. And so I feel like it kind of takes away those excuses of like, well, the portal and we have to build programs with the portal now. You have to use it to your advantage. You have to get and you just enforce your will on teams. I think Marissa, like I said, they're more competitive than they've been at times. I still don't know if I see a 500 season in their book for this season. At some point, you're going to be tired of non-500 seasons, is my personal opinion.
Yeah, I would agree with that, and I think like the recipe that Illinois showed is that you got to go hire a coach who has been extremely, extremely successful and made the tournament at the mid-major level or at whatever level. And Shauna did that, like at Dayton. Dayton was one of the best mid-major programs in the country under her, and they were playing in March. And that's the type of coach that you got to go out and find. And it helped that Shauna Green was the type of coach who had a good relationship with her players, who was able to bring multiple of those players from Dayton, including Makira Cook, to over to Illinois, and they've been cooking, pun intended. Brent Shupel, another one, and so yeah, that's kind of the blueprint that you got to follow.
And she had, I think one thing that people don't understand is she had connections in the Midwest that you could then like tap into right off the bat. Like,
Yeah.
Let's be honest, it's a hard sell to try and tell someone from California, Florida, Texas, hey, do you want to spend winters in Illinois, Wisconsin, Minnesota? You're gonna freeze to the floor, and like you have to have those Midwest connections. And she built, I said she kept the players there that fit her style. She had her own kind of flair that really is difficult to play against in the Big Ten, because they were not always the Big Ten was not always the most athletic conference. I just think like the excuses are limited. Like, I'm not saying I'm expecting Wisconsin that they should expect a national championship, but at so many years, you're like, you got to find that, like you said, that coach that's going to hit the ground running and just get them off the ground. Because it feels like if you don't do that right off the bat, it's kind of DOA. Like, you're just kind of buying time, because the slow build isn't always what a lot of, in today's day and age, is a slow build going to build, actually.
Yeah, you said it, because a while ago you would have said like it's almost impossible to do what Shauna Green did, coming in year one and winning like that at a program that had been that dormant for that long. But with the transfer portal, it is possible, and it's still not easy to do in year one, but it's possible. And by year two or year three, you can really start to get going at this point. And Marissa, correct me if I'm wrong, year four for her?
Correct.
Yeah. So at this point, it's basically all her program. She's built it into everything that she wants it to be. So you're right. At a certain point, you got to have a winning season. You don't have to win a national championship. You got to have a winning season.
I'm on board. So I said that's my hot take of the day. Is I think Wisconsin might be looking soon-ish. I will say. I don't know if it's on fire, but I will say soon-ish. Now, I said, we won't get him in trouble here, but we'll go here. Before we get to my favorite part of Kelvin's bets, because he's the money man, let's see. What is one or two bold predictions you have? It could be a result. It could be a player, how they do. What's the one or two bold predictions from Kelvin for the Big Ten season?
Wow, bold predictions. All right, yeah. Not get me in trouble, but put me on the spot a little bit. Let me think.
We have a question. We have a follow-up question too after your bold predictions. We have one follow-up.
Oh, what's the follow-up?
Who is I want you to pick a team that's not ranked or that's in the 9th or below that you think is going to find a way to upset one of the 8-1 teams in a game this year.
Okay, let's see. Where's that cutoff between 8 and 9?
I would
think about where that even is.
Like UCL, the California schools, Iowa, Ohio State, Illinois, Michigan State.
Who's number 8? Give me number 8.
Suddenly lose some. Nebraska. They're ranked.
Nebraska. All right. Outside of those 8, who?
One of the other teams in the conference that you think is going to knock off one of those.
Did you say Illinois?
I did. Illinois is on there.
You said Illinois. I already can't keep them straight. Let's see.
Basically, just
Iowa.
a team in the bottom half of the conference that you think they're going to surprise up and have one of those games that just goes right for them and they knock off one of the top half of the conference.
Yeah. All right. So I got an answer for both of those. For that one, I'm going to say Oregon. We talked about them already, and I do think again once we see them get deeper in the season and play in the road, we'll find out. But I do think that they're more competitive than they were last year or two.
Fair.
To your first question, I'm very high on Michigan State this year. I think if you want to go with a bold prediction, I'm going to say Michigan State in the Sweet 16. Damn. I don't know when the last time they made the Sweet 16. Did they make the Sweet 16 when they had Aerial Powers? I don't remember.
Nope.
It's probably been a while.
I think a second round.
Yeah. but is that bold enough?
Yeah.
I was trying to get a little bit bold for you, a little bit spicy.
I'll take it. I thought you were gonna say something like somewhat like Michigan State makes Final Four. I'm like, man, he out his mind.
I'm not gonna go that far. I'm not gonna go that far. Sweet 16.
Fair. So we'll start with predictions, and then now we're gonna do your money line. Who is going to be the player of the year in the Big Ten Conference?
Juju.
That was easy.
That was a little bit easier than the last two.
Coach of the year in the Big Ten Conference.
Coach of the year. This one's a little bit harder. I am I correct? If I remember correctly, these awards only count conference season, right?
Only conference stats. That's what they use them for.
Because right now it's Corey Close, but who knows? Because conference hasn't started yet. So I'd probably still put her as the front runner.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think that you got a couple other coaches who could really be. I think Shauna Green could seriously be in the conversation. I think she had them competitive from year one, and they took a little bit of a dip in year two, and now they're right back where they were. I think this year. I think Robin Freilich. I said I'm high on Michigan State. That means I'm high on their coach too. I think she's a serious candidate, and I honestly think Kevin McGuff has a shot too, because I think a lot of people thought that they would drop off a lot more than what I thought they would and what they really have, losing J.C. Sheldon and then without Cody McMahon for a while. But they've been playing at a high level, so I'll throw those names in there.
Freshman of the year.
Freshman of the year. That one, I think it's going to be between Silas Swords and Jelani Cambridge. I think I got to go with Silas Swords.
I'm like the pretty big two there for like to kind of bounce. At least it's a two-person race. It's not like the Big Ten player of the year the last 3 years.
Yeah.
Now this one you can take a little time on. Most improved player in the Big Ten. I don't think it's an actual award, but we'll say most improved player in the Big Ten.
Should be an award. Mm-hmm. Most improved. Lauren Betts.
Fair. She looked good.
Yeah, and I mean she was already good, but she's taking it to a new level.
She looks more mobile now. Like before she was very stagnant, like kind of stayed in the paint, didn't really move much. She looks very mobile now.
She's mobile, well, and she can pass out of doubles now. She can do a lot of different things that she wasn't doing earlier in her college career.
A taller Cameron Brink. Okay, here we go, the over and under. Let's see if I can do these correct.
All right, I've been waiting for this. My favorite part. You give me these over-unders. Let's go.
We're starting with 3.5 losses by the regular season Big Ten champ. Over or under?
3.5. I'm going to say over. Too many good teams in this league.
3.5 losses by the tournament champion. They can be
Over.
the same or different. Over. 10.5 teams make the NCAA tournament. Over or under?
That's interesting because when you sent me the notes, you asked how many teams are going to make the tournament. I put in my notes 11. So right there, barely, but I'm going to say over. I think that's a good line. I think 10.5 is about where I think you got to set the line.
Then the net just came out today, so that maybe helps a little.
Yeah. First net's always weird though.
Fair.
It's always weird.
3.5 players finish averaging over 20 points per game in conference play. Right now in non-con, there are 2.
So, but you're saying just in conference play, not
just
for the
in
whole
conference
season?
play. 3.5 over or under players averaging 20 or more points per game.
I'm going to say under.
Under.
I think there's going to be a lot around like 17 and 19.
Fair. 3.5 Big Ten teams make the Sweet 16. Over or under?
Over.
Over. This one, I don't know if this is allowed, but we're going to try it because I didn't want to give it away. 0.5 Big Ten teams make the Final Four. Over or under?
Over.
You have a 1?
What's that?
You have a 1 or a 2
A
there?
1? A 1 or 1 or a 2? Well, 1.5. I don't know.
Fair. And now for selfish reasons, I have to get his opinion. He knows. You have to do 2 over and under for the Gophers, and there's one caveat that changes on them.
Okay.
Over, under, if Mara returns, 7.5 conference games won. Over, under, if she returns.
For the whole conference season.
For the whole conference season, all 18 games.
that's a good line too. That's about I'll say over. I'll say over, but I think it's pretty close to that. 8 or 9.
If Mara doesn't come back, over under 5.5 games won in conference season.
Ooh. I think I gotta say under. Sorry, Eric.
It hit.
I mean, you mentioned the schedule doesn't do them any favors. They play 4 games against the LA teams, right?
2, just the 2.
2.
We go out there for 2 games, and then it's in that 5 games. It's that 5-game stretch of UCLA, USC, Iowa, Indiana at home, and then at Ohio State.
Who do they play twice?
Wisconsin.
Minnesota.
We play the Badgers twice.
Oh, that's actually the opposite of.
And every team we play once, beside Badgers, we play the Badgers twice.
Yeah. I might have to go over then, actually.
Over?
That schedule sets up a little bit better than I was thinking in my head.
And I'm asking it now before we see what happens next Sunday at Nebraska. I'm like, yeah, because that might like shift your opinion. So I'm like, let's let him see him at 9-0 and leading the conference.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
I said I had to have my selfish ones in there. You survived the over and under. We'll keep doing them because I haven't completely bombed them again like I did one time. So, Calvin, I cannot say thank you enough. We got time here. We got it before the conference season starts. I know you're jazzed. I know you're pumped for it. I'm nervous for it. You're pumped for it. I don't think you're as invested in the Big Ten teams as some people, some of us are, but
I'm just invested in hoop.
See, exactly. Now, like I always say, he's the podcast king. Where can the people find the podcast king?
That's high praise. We'll let the people decide, but I'm on Twitter and Instagram and whatever stuff at Wetzel31. People keep trying to get me on Blue Sky. Maybe I have to head over there. I don't know. We'll see what it's all about, but maybe I gotta at least like sign up and take that username before someone takes it, because that's my username everywhere. So Wetzel31. I got a regular podcast with Karina Mustafa on her hoop stats, coast to coast every week. We've been coming out on Thursday mornings, recording Wednesdays, putting out Thursday mornings every week. So tune into that and just other random content here or there.
So what I'm hearing is this should release on Thursday afternoon, so you have the double dose of Calvin on Thursdays?
Are you releasing this one on Thursday?
We sure are.
All right. Hey, how about that? Yep.
Double dose of the podcast king. Well, I said, and everyone, make sure you follow, and I'll do my shameless plug. Karina, they will also take gifts. Calvin and Karina will take gifts. They will take.
It's
they both
true. Will. Eric sent me a Minnesota hoodie, a Mara Braun hoodie, and I wore it on the next podcast. And if anyone wants to send me stuff with your team or whatever, I'll wear it. I'll wear it on a podcast.
And give Karina some too. I mean, that girl.
Yeah.
Tend to both.
What am I thinking? I'm being all selfish here. Send her some love. Send her some gear.
Send them to both. And I will also say, after Calvin wore it, the Gophers did go on to beat Michigan State, Michigan, and Nebraska before the injury of last year. So it works when Calvin puts a sweatshirt on. But once again, thank you so much. Looking forward to the season. Like I said, we don't want to take too much of your time now. We'll release it on Thursday for the double dose of Calvin. You get to see him twice that day, people. So, but once again, thank you as always for doing this. Welcome up.